Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday. This is John Cantera, the double broker bounty hunter, and welcome to Stop the Scam. We got a very special show for you this week. We're going to have a special guest, and if you've been paying attention to our posts, you already know who it is. So I'm sure people are going to start lining up any minute with wonderful questions for our upcoming guest. But before we start with our guest, we want to go ahead and update a couple of the investigations that we're working on. Kate, what do you got going on with MABE?
I mean, just more people coming over. It's pretty crazy. It seems like every other day somebody's sending me a message, or I'm seeing a post, or I'm seeing something about somebody being, screwed over by them. They didn't get paid or whatever. It's really sad. I mean, these people are putting all of their money into this stuff, and they're just not paying them, and it's it really just kind of burns me.
We get these or these carriers who bring on owner operators and then just don't pay them. It's criminal. And what drives me nuts is how many law enforcement agencies don't seem like they're taking any real notice of it. They're calling it, oh, it's a civil matter. No, it's not a civil matter. It's freaking criminal.
You're
And
talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, people, yeah, rates in the transportation industry right now are not great, but still, in terms of transportation, it's a lot of money. Thousands and thousands of dollars every single week, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, it's it's so much money, and dare I call it theft. I mean,
I don't think there's anything else
crazy.
to call it, but that's neither here nor there. But so the MABE stuff is still going on. If anyone out there is considering signing on with MABE Logistics or MABE Transportation, that's MABE, think twice, please. Absolutely, please think twice. If you have any issues, you can always contact us. We can share with you whatever information we have on it. But we want to make sure that you are being smart about whoever owner operators are trying to sign on with. Vet the carriers you work with, please. It is absolutely essential. Same thing goes with dispatch services. Kate and I are both dispatchers, and we've heard all the bad things there are about dispatchers out there. Vet us, please. Get references, call the references, actually check on us. Make sure you're making a smart decision for what's right for you and your business. Um,
While we're on that point,
yeah, please.
www.dispatch-verified.org has verified, vetted dispatchers. Just throwing that out there. And we also put in, we update the website to include any fraudulent reports. So there's a watch list page that you can look and see what dispatchers are on there, even carriers. It's really a neat thing.
Okay, well, we've kind of hyped in the last hour our special guest coming out here. So I definitely want to go ahead and start bringing them up because I'm sure there's going to be a lot going on. I do want to preface all of this by saying that this is all just transpired. There is nothing planned about our guest's visit. Are no pre-selected questions or anything of the sort, and it's pretty much an AMA of sorts. Ask him anything. So we are open to fire anything you want at this guy. The only thing I ask is be professional. Absolutely positively, be professional. Okay. And remember that Carrier 411 is a platform. It provides the vehicle by which these comments are put up there. The brokers are the ones who are filing the comments. So especially when we're talking about the freight guard. So please keep that in mind as we go on and bring our guest in. And so formally to introduce Mr. Darren Brewer, CEO of Carrier 411. Welcome to the show, Darren. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks, John. Kate.
Want to start off with a few questions. I want to give Kate the first shot so that we can try to frame this. Go ahead, Kate. I know you are chomping at the bit. Have at it.
I just want to kind of ease in with some very basic things. My first and very broad question is, where did you start? Where did you start in terms of the transportation industry?
So I founded Carrier 411 a little over 19 years ago. And there's always a good story behind everything. I used to own a big factoring company at the time, and had thousands of carriers that factored with us. So one of the things that we did was verify everything about every load that got funded, even prior to funding. So all my employees, I had about 14 at the time, we were spending so much time and effort constantly going to the FMCSA websites to verify information and changes every day. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to go about doing this, because everything that we did was very efficient, very automated. So I had wrote all my own code for my factoring company at the time. So I started out and was writing some code for my factoring company. And then all of a sudden the light bulb went off. And I realized, oh my God, if I need this, I'll bet there's a lot of other people out there that will need this too. And really it was brokers that I had in mind. So immediately I stopped what I was doing for my own company, and I transitioned everything to Carrier 411. And we went live in beta with it in January of 2005, publicly released it at a trade show in, I believe it was March of 2005. And the response was just overwhelming. I mean, brokers were lined up 6 rows deep, even after show hours, wanting to see what it was all about. And we've taken a very unconventional approach. We are the 800-pound gorilla. We have over 4,500 brokerages that use us, plus about 600 or 700 shippers and some other customers. And today, for example, we had well over 60,000 people on the platform. And 80% of our customers are brokers, including 97 of the top 100 brokerages. So that's how Carrier 411 kind of came to be. And it's evolved over the years into really what it is today.
Okay. So what kind of people are specifically not allowed on Carrier 411?
So Carrier 411 predominantly is a platform for brokers, licensed bonded property brokers that have active broker authority with the FMCSA, and they represent 80% of our customer base. The other 10% is shipper manufacturers. The remaining 10% is what we call vertical market customers. Like, for example, we have about 170 factoring companies, insurance companies, and things like that. But Carrier 411, I really want to be clear, is not a service for carriers. We do not let carriers have accounts. We do not talk to carriers about anything. And as a matter of fact, our phone system is integrated live with our databases, and it blocks every single known phone number for every carrier to prevent them from calling our office. But in addition to carriers, there are also several other types of companies or businesses within the transportation industry that we will not allow to have accounts. Kind of off the top of my head, that includes attorneys, law firms, collection services, compliance services, dispatch services, third-party staffing services, and a few others. And accounts are allowed solely at our discretion. Even brokers and shippers that want accounts, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to allow them to have an account.
Okay. So I'm curious, I know that you don't you don't speak to carriers, and that's made very clear. If anybody's ever visited your website, they can see it's very obvious that no carriers are allowed.
Yeah. Hey, last year our phone system blocked over 43,000 phone calls from trucking companies that called our office.
So I'm curious, do you have any kind of system in place to investigate freight guards? Because as we've learned in our time, what was it, John? Something like 50 to 80% of them are emotionally charged.
I would say a lot of the people, when they submit freight guard reports, are emotionally charged because they feel like they've been wronged by the carrier, and it affected their business, it affected their load, it affected their customer, and it affected them personally. So yeah, a lot of them are quite upset, and absolutely, it's easy to see. When you look at the reports, you can tell if somebody's pretty worked up. But I would say for the most part, people are somewhat rational about the reports. We take them very seriously. Our customers take them seriously, and because we know the carriers that get reported take them extremely seriously.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain standards, and I won't really discuss too much about the details of our standards, but I can assure you reports are vetted to a certain degree. I've got 2 or 3 people in the office who are reviewing every report within minutes of them being submitted. Okay. We do have certain internal guidelines, and there are some reports that instantly we will delete at our discretion.
Okay. So, I guess so an example that I could give, I guess something that's relative to me, a situation that I just dealt with the other day. One of my carriers went to go pick up a load, and it was a residential load. It wasn't anything from, a big warehouse to another warehouse or anything like that. It was a guy that had purchased a tractor, and he needed that tractor moved from point A to point B.
Okay.
So he reached out to a specific brokerage. That brokerage obviously found the truck, and my truck hauled that freight. Well, my driver got there, and the guy didn't know exactly which one he was talking about, which one he needed. He didn't have any paperwork. So
who's the guy? When you say the guy is the person who had the
shipper.
freight?
The shipper. The shipper.
Okay.
So my driver got there, and the shipper did not have any paperwork. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to be picking up, and so the only thing that my driver had to go by was the rate confirmation that we got. So he zoomed in on the rate confirmation to show the guy the description of what we were picking up. Mm-hmm. And in the corner, way down at the bottom right corner, you could see a little bit of the rate. And nothing was said. The shipper didn't say anything. The driver didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. But apparently, shortly after that, the shipper had called the broker. And the broker called me and said, he said, I'm trying to think about how I should say this, but I'm just going to say what he said.
Oh, I'd be blunt and direct and just say it like it is.
He said, you better give me a real fucking good explanation for why my customer knows what you're being paid. And I'm thinking, whoa, please respectfully do not speak to me like that. And that's not something that I did. However, all the driver had as far as paperwork was the rate confirmation. Mm-hmm. He quickly zoomed in and showed it to him. The guy didn't say anything to him. Everybody went on about the day. But that guy obviously, I guess, overbid the lane and kept quite a bit of the rate.
I'm sorry, Kate. That guy is whom?
The broker.
Overbid the lane, meaning he offered
the guy paid
more money than
he charged more than he probably should for the lane.
Yeah, I could understand that.
So, but that's the way of the industry. You can, to be frank, you can do that. Mm-hmm. So we accepted the rate, and we were satisfied with the rate. It paid fine for what the lane was and what the load was. But I guess he clearly got, quite a bit more from the shipper. Well, he was
so
angry.
You're using the term shipper, and I understand that. But if I understand you correctly, you said this is just some person, an individual who had something to ship that needed to be picked up and moved. I get your use of the term shipper, but in this case, I think it's more of just an individual person, right?
Yes, you're right.
But in general, I mean, I don't want to really speak for all brokers, but I do know this: brokers do protect their relationships with their customers. And one of the things that, I think you'll find, especially if you're operating a dispatch service, I assume you're probably signing the broker carrier contracts on behalf of the carrier.
Oh, yes.
You'll know the majority of those contracts have provisions in there, for things like non-substitution of carrier, which means no double brokering.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also provisions in there that would prevent the carrier from, approaching the broker's customer and interacting with the
back solicitation clauses.
You got it. Back solicitation. So, understandably, brokers are wanting to protect the relationship with their customer, and they don't want any kind of information necessarily shared with their customer. But normally it's the carriers that are approaching the customers, trying to replace the broker, saying, hey, I can move your freight for less. This broker is charging you too much. But in this situation, as you've described it, it sounds a little different. The driver sounds like put the rate con in front of the individual who you call the shipper, and that person saw the rate. Well, the reality is the carrier accepted the rate, probably signed the rate con, agreed to move the load, and then worst case, that person, the customer, might have realized how much money is being made by the broker and potentially the carrier. But at the end of the day, that person agreed to hire the carrier through, to move the freight.
Right. So my question to you is that guy was very, very angry, and
that guy was
the broker. Sorry, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm not very.
Sorry, I'm familiar with the situation. I'll translate.
So the broker had been texting me at like 5 a.m. just ripping into me, saying he was I'm gonna put a freight guard on you. I'm gonna do this and that. I'm gonna report you to the FMCSA. Whatever. So in situations like that, where that guy is being a hothead.
That guy being the broker that you're interacting. You have to forgive me. Yes. I kind of have an issue with pronouns. I like to follow what people are saying to me. The broker had an issue with you as the dispatch service for the carrier.
As the dispatcher, yes.
Okay.
Well, he didn't necessarily have an issue with me, but as the dispatcher, we're basically the main point of contact for every single side. Mm-hmm. So for the shipper, the consignee, the broker, we are the point of contact. So if anybody's going to get yelled at, it's us.
Yeah.
So normally,
typically, even though
they're treating you as if you were the dispatcher at the trucking company, and they're looking at as the carrier has done them wrong by doing something, so they need to have some words with someone about it. I can understand.
Yeah. But in a situation like that, had he actually put that freight guard on the carrier, what would your team do by refusing to speak with the carrier? How would you know if something is really legitimate?
Okay, so I want you to understand several things that are really important here. The majority of the industry, brokers, use carrier 411. All right. I mean, on average, we have brokers look up over 800 to 900 carriers per minute on our site. Okay. Freight guard reports are just one feature, one very small part of our service. It's a feature. We provide the ability for our customers to submit reports about carriers based on their direct firsthand experience with the carriers. That's not what we're all about. Most people think we're just all about these reports. Oh, you're just some reporting service that lets brokers say whatever they want because they pay you money. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. So when reports are submitted, we do review them. Without you providing me with any more specific information, it's hard for me to say what would have been reported, unless you know for a fact that a freight guard report was submitted by that broker about the carrier. So did the broker submit a freight guard report about the carrier?
No, he didn't. I knew that he wasn't going to. He was just speaking angrily, but it was just frustrating. So
yeah, well, we make it very clear to people, but you can't make people pay attention, especially a lot of these younger kids who are on the front lines in the industry. These reports are not intended to be used as a weapon. Really, it's more of a collegial thing between the logistics industry and brokers and shippers to share their experiences with about carriers. There is no such thing as a good freight guard report. All right, let's be clear about that. It's for things like double brokering, holding loads hostage, back soliciting customers, freight theft, cancellations, repeated pickup or delivery service failures, things like that. Back in the very early days of Carrier 411, around 2006, which is about the time when I introduced all the freight guard report stuff into Carrier 411, we actually provided the ability for our Carrier 411 customers to submit positive reports about carriers. But ironically, what we learned very quickly is that, yes, a lot of our broker customers are also asset-based. They do have a trucking side. And what we found was the only people submitting positive reports about carriers were the brokers submitting reports about their own trucking company or their brother's trucking company or their cousin's trucking company. And those were just bullshit reports. Because if you think about it, no broker wants any other brokers to know who their good core carriers are. They're not going to say, oh, this is a great carrier, you should use them. No, these brokers are competing with each other. Although they are also looking out for each other too, which is a good thing. And that's what the nature of the freight guard reports are all about. And these brokers love those reports. As far as when a report is submitted, we would have looked at the criteria that the carrier was reported for. Okay. And it's real easy to tell if somebody's emotionally charged. If they submit a report, they'll just go in and check every single thing that they could possibly check to report the carrier. We don't tolerate that. Mm-hmm. We look for the supporting comments, the comments that the broker must provide. And those comments absolutely must substantiate all the items that they're reporting the carrier for. Okay. So if they report the carrier for double brokering, for example, and there's absolutely nothing in the reported comments that say anything about double brokering, well, we know that's an issue. And if necessary, although we try to avoid it, we will call the broker if we have to. Now, we don't get involved in the reports. We're not like the white stuff in the middle of an Oreo cookie, okay? We can't possibly get involved with every single freight guard report, no matter how much carriers want us to or think we should. Oh, you need to fully investigate every report. How could you possibly let anyone submit a report without you doing a thorough investigation? That's not possible. Okay.
That's a logistical nightmare. I mean, I know doing my own, it takes a couple of hours per report that I work on. So I completely get it.
I will tell you, so I'm a little unusual. I am the founder, I am the CEO, although my current title is Chief Crazy Officer. I'm very passionate about who we are and what we do and the role that we play in the industry. But I assume there's maybe carriers watching this, but we do more to protect the industry than just help brokers and shippers. I mean, indirectly, we are also helping to protect carriers, factoring companies, insurance companies, and more from all these bad actors. And I got to tell you, the fraud schemes, the scammers this year, I mean, today is what, March 18th, 2024. Last year, the fraud schemes and the scams were like nothing else I'd ever seen in almost 30 years of being in the industry. And I knew that this year in 2024, they were going to be worse than last year, except they were going to progress at a rate that was even more accelerated. And that's exactly what everybody's seeing this year. The scammers, the fraud schemes, far more aggressive. I mean, these people are getting so much more creative, and they're advancing by the week. The problem with that, though, is that it's what the fraud schemes are. It's not just double brokering. It's much more than that, and it's much more sophisticated and elaborate. Predominantly, what we're seeing is the identity theft of carriers, the identity theft of brokers, the identity theft of shippers, stolen freight. That is one of the big things right now is freight. That's entire truckloads of freight being targeted for theft. Then there's the double brokering, triple brokering, quadruple brokering. And over the last month, we've even gotten reports about loads being rebrokered 5 times over. And that's just not good for anybody in the industry, especially carriers. Okay. Because we don't want to see anybody come out on the short end of the stick because of these scammers, especially carriers. So we do review every report. If anything doesn't meet our internal standards, we will take action, especially if we feel like something was inaccurate or blatantly misreported or exaggerated. And we make it clear to people on the site, stick to the facts, don't make things matter of personal opinions. Understand these reports are being submitted predominantly for other brokers, their colleagues, to see and understand. And please do a good job of explaining the situation without embellishing anything. People shouldn't say things like, oh, if you use this carrier, you're going to get screwed too. No, don't do that. And things like that are inappropriate and not allowed from our perspective. So we do police these reports pretty carefully. And if necessary, the brokers will get a phone call from us. And if we ever find that any of our broker or shipper customers are abusing freight guard reports, that we're going to take serious action promptly, including but not limited to canceling their account instantly without notice and permanently blacklisting, so they can never have an account with us again, ever. Or
have you ever considered
we may disable their ability to submit freight guard reports. We won't let them.
Okay. Have you ever considered having a team dedicated to looking into those?
What do you mean by looking into those?
Looking into the freight guard reports.
What do you mean by looking into? Please define that for me.
Okay, so on our side of things, we see, and I'm not saying that any of these are, illegitimately done or that most of them are, but on our side, so we always see things from the carrier perspective because we work for the carrier. So in many cases, people come to us and they say, hey, I've had this freight guard put on me and I'm not able to get any work because of this one freight guard or whatever. This is a situation that happened and I, can't fix it. And because so many people use Carrier 411, it can hinder their ability to make a living. So have you ever considered having like an in-house team of people to investigate the freight guards that come through, whether that's just a simple phone call to the broker or dare I say, a phone call to the carrier to get both sides
Yeah.
and go from there.
No, we're never going to talk to carriers about anything. Carriers are not our customers. And as you know, if they try to call our office, they're going to be blocked. So the short answer, no. Okay. If we feel the need to discuss the report with the person who submitted it or whoever they report to, our primary contact for the account, we will. That is not uncommon. Like John was saying, it would be absolutely impossible for us to open an investigation about every single report that's submitted. I can tell you this, the majority of the freight guard reports that are submitted by brokers, substantially at their core, are correct. Carriers, I have talked to some carriers before about reports out of concern or interest, and you get a very different story from the carrier. Usually the carrier completely denies what they did, despite the broker having indisputable proof of what the carrier did. And that carrier will deny it all day long. Well, it's hard to deny the proof. And if there's ever a report that's brought into question with us and we have to talk to the broker about it, one of the first things we ask for is for them to explain the situation and the proof that they have to substantiate it and whether they have proof. Okay. So if they're making allegations, wild allegations, and they don't have documented proof to back it up, well, that's a problem. Okay. And we don't tolerate that. Now, we couldn't possibly, on average, there's well over 150 freight guard reports that get submitted every day at an absolute minimum. Okay. I just want you to think about this. Could you understand the resources it would take to undertake an investigation to look into every single freight guard report, to get everyone's side of it as if we're the judge and the referee? Okay. That's not our role here. And I think, John understands Carrier 411 is a platform. It's a software as a service platform for brokers and shippers and qualified logistics industry professionals. And these freight guard reports do not really involve us. We are the platform. We are the service. It's not our role to be judge and jury. It's not our role to investigate them. Although we do monitor them and we pay very close attention to them. The resources that it would take it's impossible. We couldn't possibly do it. And it makes no sense. The brokers are responsible for the reports that they submit. But we are Carrier 411 is protected under federal law. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And there's some very well-defined limits of what we can do and what we cannot do, what we can be and what we cannot be. And there are lines that we cannot cross. It's very much like we're treated as the publisher, the platform, but we are not the ones submitting the reports. So we have to be very careful about our involvement in things, and we cannot get too involved.
So go ahead, John.
No, I was going to jump over to some of the comments that are coming in because our viewers aren't seeing what we're seeing on our screens. But I want to tie the conversation together a little bit with some of the stuff that's coming in. We had a user who's talking about fairness, giving a verdict against the carrier without listening to the party, and you addressed this. Your customer is the broker, and if you think that there's an issue, you do talk to the broker about it. And that, to me, is, in my opinion, and forgive me, carriers, if you think I'm siding with brokers here, but to me, that rates justification. And as he pointed out before, there's not enough time in the day to really get into each of these freight guards to understand whether or not they're actually accurate. We
do review them, John. I want to be very clear about that. Within minutes of every report being submitted, it's reviewed by at least 2 or 3 people here at Carrier 411. Every single report is reviewed. That doesn't mean that we can get involved and investigate every single report, but we do review every single report within minutes. Unless the report is submitted in the middle of the night, which also happens. Okay.
And I think that question more comes from this comment right here, which I think almost every carrier in the world is probably thinking at this moment right now. The impact on carriers. Mm-hmm. Now, are you aware, for the record, are you aware of the impact that these reports do have on carriers?
Oh, absolutely. But before I address that, I don't want to sound like a politician and give you an indirect answer to your question. But let's push rewind for a second, because you had something that popped up on the screen just a minute ago that had the word verdict in it. Okay. There we go. So I don't know, is this a question that someone just posed? Isn't it fair to give a verdict against a carrier without listening to the party? So let's make one thing clear. We're not judging carriers. We're not rating carriers. We're not ranking carriers. We're not telling brokers what carriers they should use or should not use. We're not passing judgment on carriers in any way, shape, or form. There is no verdict by Carrier 411 about a motor carrier. Our customers make their own hiring decisions based on information and facts that are available to them. Okay. So this use of the word verdict, we don't issue verdicts. We don't hold carriers accountable. We don't pass judgment on carriers. We're an information platform. I mean, we actually obtain and maintain 24 different FMCSA data sets under subscription, plus all of our own proprietary data. Okay. So we're not judging carriers, plain and simple.
So I have a question about kind of related. So as I understand, when a freight guard is submitted, an email is sent to the carrier stating that they received that freight guard or that a report has been made on their MC. Is that true? Okay. So does that email...
And possibly if the carrier also has a fax number, it would be automatically faxed to the carrier as well.
Okay. Does that information include the brokerage who made the report?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
It identifies the report, who submitted the report, the broker, the name of their company, the individual, and the reported items, as well as the comments. The carrier can see everything about the report, and the notification makes it very clear and simple to the carrier. Hey, you got reported. Here's what you were reported for. Here's who reported you. Now, if you'd like to go respond to that report, here's how and where you go respond. Mm-hmm. Very clear, very simple. And they're given the website and the response code that's unique to the report where they can go and respond. And the reports are open for 72 hours from the moment it was submitted. And the reported company has 72 hours to respond. Now, because of all the scammers and the fraud schemes in the industry, most of the fraud is coming from Eastern Europe. Armenia, Serbia, Chechnya, Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Uzbekistan, Moldova, and then there's India, Pakistan, and we're seeing things really starting to ramp up in some unusual places. Because of it, Carrier 411 drops and blocks all internet traffic that comes to us from outside the United States and Canada. If you're in, Uzbekistan or Ukraine, you will not even be able to get through to our sites. You're blocked. You're dropped. So a lot of these reports, if they get emailed to the carrier, your jaw would drop if you understood how much of the transportation and logistics industry in the United States and Canada does not operate out of the United States or Canada.
Oh, I know.
Okay. Think about that. You got most of these bad actors, the problem makers, and they're mostly in, let's just say, Eastern Europe, for instance. And they get an email alerting them to a report that was just submitted about their trucking company, but they're in Eastern Europe. and we block all traffic from outside the US and Canada, they can't even get through to our website to respond to the reports.
Mhm.
Okay? But they try. They try coming in on VPNs and anonymizing proxy servers and things that are data center related, like they'll use remote desktops to try to bypass our security, but they run headfirst into a brick wall.
So what happens at the point that a carrier responds to a report? Then what happens? What's the next step?
Instantly, when if a carrier responds to a report, the report is released instantly, automatically within the 72 hours. So let's say, I know you operate a dispatch service, one of your carriers got reported for something, and then let's say 1 hour later, the carrier responded to the report. Okay. Even though the carrier had 72 hours, they responded within an hour. The moment they responded, that report's released, and any of our customers can see the report and the response from the carrier. Now, I think that's important for carriers to understand. People don't just look at the reports. They actually can see the response from the carrier. And let me tell you, they will look at the response from the carrier. They do. And I hear from some of our broker customers, they will disregard certain reports because they know it's transportation. Stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
And for the most part, you trust people to have common sense and judgment and not just say, oh, here's somebody who got, their panties in a wad because the carrier canceled the load. Well, sometimes it's much more than that. They can see the response from the carrier, and I would like to deliver this message to carriers. Be really careful about the response that you give for a freight guard report, because you wouldn't believe some of the things that these carriers say. It's unbelievable, okay? And everybody can see their response. I won't even go into some of the details, but it's the worst thing that a carrier could do, respond inappropriately to a freight guard report. Okay, in very bad language, calling brokers really bad things, and so forth. The best thing that a carrier could do is to respond in an accurate way. Acknowledge if what they were reported for really happened, if it did.
So
and try to explain why it happened. That's the purpose.
So if a carrier responds to say there's just some blatant freight guard that gets put up, and the carrier responds to it and says, this is absolutely not true. This is what happened. Whatever. Are things like that looked at, or
looked at by whom?
By you and
your staff
company?
We know if a carrier has responded to the report, but we don't watch the carrier responded to the report, because I don't want to sound callous and make it sound like we don't care whether the carrier responds. We'd like to believe the carrier will respond to the report if they can, but we don't sit there and watch and read carriers' responses. And I can assure you, if a carrier responds, we don't ever do anything to modify their response in any way. It is exactly as it was submitted and stated by whoever responded.
Oh, I meant more like if you were to see that comment from the carrier, would that prompt you to be like, oh, okay, this was something that should have been pulled down?
No, because a lot of them are liars, especially the scammers. And these freight guard reports are really between the broker that submitted the report and the carrier that got reported. It's between the two of them.
Right.
Okay. And again, we're the platform, and that kind of puts us in the middle. But we're not going to be in the middle of any kind of disputes. It's not a tennis match where we're going to go back and forth, and that's not our role here.
Yeah, I understand.
I have talked to a lot of brokers about reports, and I've also correspondingly talked to the same carrier about the reports. And I always ask the broker, all right, hey, I got to ask you, if I'm going to call this carrier about this report for some reason, is there anything you're not telling me, broker? Is there something you're leaving out here that if I talk to the carrier, they're going to tell me something that you're leaving out? Any kind of detail. And then if I actually do talk to a carrier, and I have, over certain things before, and we will especially do that if there's alleged identity theft. All right. And if I ever talk to a carrier or someone here at Carrier 411 does, we'll ask the carrier, hey, is there something you're leaving out and not telling us? And inevitably, there's always something both parties leave out of the story, and they tend to make the stories one-sided. Maybe that's human nature. But overall, I would say I think the brokers do a pretty good job of representing the facts of the situation in a pretty good way. And at least the times that we have, talked to carriers over the last 19 plus years about reports, not that we side with either party, but usually what we find is the broker has indisputable proof of what they reported the carrier for doing. And it's usually unquestionable. The carrier just doesn't want to admit it.
Yeah.
Or they tell you something different and you don't know. All you know is what the carrier told you.
Right.
I've come across a situation once before while dealing with a freight guard for a carrier where the broker no longer existed, but the report is on the site still. Is there any potential remedy for dealing with an issue like that?
Yes. But it's not necessarily going to happen by the carrier trying to communicate with us. Okay. There are brokers that go out of business. I really think in 2024, it's going to be a tough year for the mid-sized brokerages that do between 20 to 50 million. Just like, Convoy got hit last year. I think this year you're going to see a lot of brokers go out of business. These freight guard reports, they stay up forever. And there's very good reason for that. It's so that our customers can see the pattern and the history. Like maybe 8 years ago, a carrier got reported for a few things. Then now all of a sudden, 8 years later, out of nowhere, there's a big, explosion of reports that are starting to hit. Well, that says a lot. And part of it could be because of the identity theft. Maybe the carrier's identity was stolen, but these reports do not get deleted. There have been some circumstances where brokers have gone out of business. We have been contacted by the broker or someone representing the brokerage asking us to delete certain reports, but we're also always very skeptical about it. There have been some situations where we have deleted the reports, but I'm going to assure you, we ask them more questions than the CIA. And unless we're satisfied by the answers to our questions, we're not very inclined to delete the reports. And they can't delete the reports if they're out of business because we monitor all of our broker customers. And if their broker authority ever goes inactive, we will cancel their account. It will be canceled. And they wouldn't have the ability to go in and do anything more, including deleting freight guard reports. So I don't know if it really answers your question, John.
It does. It
sometimes we will, consider it depending on what it is.
But it usually has to be initiated by somebody who was associated with the brokerage at some point to be able to
generally
have a conversation.
Speaking, yes, but I'm going to tell you about a lot of things that have been going on, especially over the last year. There's a lot of extortion going on. There's a lot of people out there who are promoting the fact that they can get freight guard reports removed. And there are a lot of companies trying to do it in illegal ways. Okay. But I want to be really clear. Nobody can get into our platform and just delete a freight guard report. Now, if they start threatening the broker, that's one thing. And what we find is if somebody's threatening a broker, that's going to be a big problem. Okay. And a lot of times what's happening is these carriers are getting with their other carriers and they're having another carrier book a load with the broker. Okay. So broker reports carrier A, carrier A gets their friend at carrier B to go book a load with the broker. And then carrier A calls the broker and says, I got your load. My friend's got it, and we're holding it hostage. And that load's not going to get delivered unless you, A, delete the report you submitted about my trucking company, and B, you sign this non-disparagement agreement. Okay. That's what's happening a lot. And that's a problem. I mean, if something like that were to happen, no way are we ever going to get involved and delete a report. But that's what's even happening after the fact. And brokers are getting threats. They're getting harassed, especially by these scammers, to the point where, I mean, it's countless emails a day, hundreds of phone calls a day, harassing everyone on the staff at the brokerage, harassing people personally, stalking people, harassing them at their homes. It's quite unbelievable, the extent. Okay. So we stay out of it. And if we feel like a broker was being pressured to delete something for some reason, I don't think we're going to delete that report, generally speaking, unless we have good reason for it. In all fairness, if it was something like, oh, there was an unresolved cargo claim, right? And maybe that's what the report was for. Well, if someone can provide us proof that that unresolved cargo claim got resolved, great. Then that report should not be there anymore. And it would get deleted. I mean, we try to be understanding as possible, but our role in this is somewhat limited.
I understand. I will say that this conversation has swayed my initial view on Carrier 411.
We are quite unique here, and I love my employees. The people who work here, they're very passionate about what they do, and we love what we do. It's not like we hate carriers. So many people think, oh, they just hate carriers. They're all about hating carriers. That's not it at all. That really has nothing to do with what we do. Mm-hmm. We don't have a problem with carriers. I mean, carriers are the backbone of our country. We love carriers.
Yeah, I feel the need to go ahead and jump in here for those of you who know me and who know the type of work that I do advertise a service for removing freight guards. But anyone who has approached me on this knows that is not involved contacting Carrier 411 to pull anything down. That it is a function of negotiation between the carrier and the broker. Okay, so please keep that in mind, folks. If you're listening and you have a freight guard issue, I'm happy to help you with it. But it's about negotiation. I'm not going after Mr. Brewer here about these issues.
It's okay, John. If you called us and you got through, we would probably talk with you. But
oh, you kidding me? You've already got my number blocked.
You might have been if you were associated with a trucking company.
I was. Several years ago, I was, but that's neither here nor there. There's another question that was asked earlier in the show that I think is interesting to bear on, co-brokering. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of the different terminology out there. Of course, you have the double brokering, you have illegal brokerage, and then you have what they're calling co-brokering, which is the agreement between two brokers on the same load. What is your take on?
I think my take is pretty fucking simple. It's called double brokering. Okay. But I will admit this. I mean, the industry has changed over the last few years. It is undeniable. Even some of the biggest mega brokers out there work with other brokers. Okay. That's clear. It's understood. Personally, do I like it? No. Is it double brokering by federal statute and the Code of Federal Regulations? Yes, it is. It's been one of those things that's been tossed around in the industry for as long as I've been in the industry, which is forever. We've even had people write articles that we've published on our website about the difference between co-brokering and double brokering. Is there a difference? No. Is there a difference? Yes. If it's with permission under a contract and agreement, it's still double brokering, but it's with permission and consent under agreement. Okay. But so many people will say, oh, they co-brokered this, when in fact, what they're really doing is just double brokering it without the knowledge and consent permission of the actual broker. And we run across this every day. So what is it, double brokering? Yes. Is it done by some of the biggest mega brokers in the industry? Yes. Is it good for the industry? I can't answer that question, but it happens and we do understand it. And, the interesting thing, like, for example, we have tons of brokers that are customers, even, like Uber Freight, for example. Love Uber Freight. But when they first, emerged in the industry and they got all the attention, they signed up for accounts with Carrier 411 right away. They got a ton of people who use Carrier 411. Well, how do you become a broker, a digital freight matching platform, and have broker authority? Effectively, they're kind of double brokering. Some of these companies are actually double brokering freight by offering a platform for people to post freight, and the company that's involved with the platform has broker authority and is getting compensated for it. That's puts them in a very interesting position. But we see that. That's kind of now part of the industry in some ways. But there is a big difference between the bad double brokering and people who are co-brokering. As long as they're legitimately co-brokering, I don't think you're going to see any carriers get screwed and not paid. Okay, at least in our experience and the way I see it. Tell me if you agree or disagree.
No, for the most part, I would agree with you. There's nothing that says that co-brokering is legal. However, it is an industry accepted practice.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is that practice needs to be standardized. As you mentioned, there should be a contract. Number one. Number two, it should be done with the permission of both brokers, and everyone involved in the transaction should know that it's been co-brokered, including the carrier.
Yeah, okay. Transparency, complete transparency.
Absolutely. And that's been something that we've been fighting for. And I know in a lot of cases that I work that turn out to be co-brokered, I'll ask for a copy of the agreement and I'll be told to go take a hike. And you know what, I understand that. But at the same token, it's about that transparency. And there's actually a federal law that covers that. That's 49 CFR 371.3, subparagraph Charlie. That is the one that I know a lot of brokers are terrified of, or at least get very angry when you cite it, because either they don't want to show what's in their hand, or they really don't want to know how the relationships work. And you know what? That's fine. As long as there's fairness in the industry, no one's going to be asking for documentation anyway. And that's one of the things that I know I've been trying to fight for on a personal level is fairness and transparency. Yeah. And that's something that in this market, it's questionable at a lot of different brokerages. And again, that's fine. There are mechanisms in place to deal with these, and there are some people who are engaging that. I know there are carrier organizations who are going after some of the big brokers for the transparency issue. We saw what happened with TQL a couple of months ago. So, it's happening. It's happening, but I can't stand co-brokering either.
Yeah, but I'm an opinionated guy, and I just say what I think.
I'm sure your attorneys love you for that.
You know, I
I'm
have
sorry.
we have great attorneys. But you know, there is one point I do want to make. I mean, we are very aware of the impact of freight guard reports and you know how they can affect carriers. You know, but if carriers are getting reported for the things that they're doing, it is the carriers that have caused the problem. And most of them are just unhappy because they got caught and they're being held accountable for it. We see that regularly. You know, it's not like we have compassion or don't have compassion for the carrier. That's not how we look at it. But we absolutely do realize the impact that these freight guard reports can have on carriers. If carriers would just do a good job and not cause any kind of problems for brokers, which is tough sometimes, life would be better for everybody. But it is transportation. It's a very imperfect thing by nature, and there's always going to be problems. I mean, if
You know, if it's one thing that
kidding yourself.
if it's one thing that I've known in this industry, it's communication is key. For carriers out there who are experiencing any kind of issue, and I mean any kind, you got to be talking with your broker. You have to be talking with the broker because surprises are what end up getting you that freight guard. When there's not a surprise, when they know that something's happening from the start, you are far less likely to be hit with a freight guard for any kind of action, as long as the broker knows what's going on and you're doing something to try to actively correct the issue. You know, that's if you're late for a pickup, if you know you have a breakdown in transit, or some other kind of serious event takes place. Communicate.
You're absolutely
And
right,
I think 99% of the freight guards that carriers get that they feel is unwarranted is because of the lack of communication.
Mhm.
And I know the ones that I end up dealing with that I help carriers to get removed. It's by trying to reconnect that communication bridge and trying to get that honest discourse between the broker and the carrier that ends up being successful at the end of the day at getting that freight guard dropped. So just because you get a freight guard, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't. Yes, they're permanent. Yes, they're going to be out there until the broker that put it up pulls it back down. Yes, there are services out there like me who can help in getting those removed, but there's absolutely no one that can promise that it can be removed. So please keep that in mind if you're looking to try to get help in trying to do this. The other thing I caution people is I would not go to an attorney first trying to get something and trying to get a freight guard removed.
You brought up a really good point, John. If I could be so rude as to interrupt you,
please.
The worst thing any carrier could do is try to sue Carrier 411 over a freight guard report. Okay. Again, we are protected by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is federal law. And if they actually got an attorney to file a complaint in any jurisdiction across the United States, that attorney just doesn't know what they're doing, because obviously they don't know federal law and they're just trying to take advantage of that carrier, because that case will get dismissed. And if it's not, sanctions will be issued and we're going to prosecute whoever did it. Because our new thing now is these people who are filing frivolous cases, lawsuits. We're now undertaking a new strategy, and we're actually going to go after whoever's filing the lawsuits and suing them here in the state of Florida under certain grounds. And we've got our first two cases that we are about to submit on that right now. So this is between the carrier and the broker. It is just that simple. And they need to resolve it between the two parties, and don't think that we have anything to do with it. If they try, they're making a big mistake, because we take it seriously. I don't know if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And not only does not make sense necessarily to sue you guys, because they'll lose apparently, but it does not help to get an attorney involved in trying to go after the broker at the outset. Okay, you may have a defamation suit or something out there against the broker, but pay attention. Other people are going to look into it and investigate it. The minute you get an attorney involved, you got retainer fees, you've got the attorney's time you're paying for, and all this stuff. It's best if you're just seeking to fix a problem to go with an independent somebody. Okay, shameless plug here, like me, who can actually get a conversation started and then hopefully get that freight guard removed, because it's going to be a lot cheaper in the long run doing it that way than trying to hire an attorney. And yes, there are people who have success with attorneys, but it's exceptionally expensive, folks. So please be careful about that kind of situation.
I am curious. I know that people have just kind of over time told me that, I know several people that have like dual authorities. They have a broker and a carrier authority, and their carrier 411 account will be shut down the minute that they're found to have carrier authority.
That's patently false. That's misinformation. You're starting to sound like CNN or MSNBC. Nothing could be furthest from the truth.
That's what people have told me.
That is just a downright lie, misinformation. You're like Democrats, okay? That's not true. And anyone who believes
so what would cause somebody who has a dual authority to lose their account? I'm going to tell you,
so a lot of our customers also have carrier authority. Some under the same MC number, most under a different MC number. And believe me, we know it, okay? Because of who we are and what we do, we keep tabs on our customers like you wouldn't believe, okay? And we watch for funny business. And if we ever see any kind of funny business going on with the brokerage or their asset side, then we will take action. Okay. Like if we found one of our broker customers has a related trucking company or 2 or 3 or 10, all right, and their trucking companies are up to shady things like back soliciting customers or holding freight hostage or double, triple brokering loads, you bet your ass we're going to cancel the account for that broker. And we're going to blacklist them because of what they're doing with their trucking company. And oh, by the way, usually directly or indirectly, it usually has something to do with the brokerage and their whole culture. We don't want people who are bad. We won't tolerate people who are bad. We only want good customers, people who we think are good at our discretion. And I think we're pretty good judges of that when it comes to gauging, who's reputable and who's not reputable. So, no, Kate, just because somebody has carrier authority does not mean they're not going to get a carrier 411 account for their brokerage. It doesn't mean we're going to cancel the account for their brokerage or anything unless there's some shady stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really good at running deep down the rabbit hole and connecting all the dots.
Mm-hmm.
And we watch for it.
Well,
and that's what brokers, love and respect about us. We're not like everybody else out there. My God, we're not like DAT. We're not like Truck Stop. I can promise you.
That is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So on a side note, I know you guys only do your thing for about an hour. We're not quite there yet. But hopefully, maybe by the end of the year, I can't say for sure, we're actually going to release a service for carriers. Very much like carrier. You could kind of think of it as like carrier 411 for carriers, but it's going to do several other things as well. It'll allow the carriers to keep tabs on their own information about their own trucking company and see it all and understand it all in one place. And historical data, because we have over 20 years of archived FMCSA data behind us. But it's also going to let them onboard with brokers, okay? And then one of the other things it'll do is it will probably give carriers the ability to submit reports about brokers. You're talking about freight guard reports. I think these will be called carrier guard reports.
I don't know if that would have been better to start out with.
You got to say
like
the best
so many
stuff
people,
till the end.
so many people probably watch this and they're like, "Oh my God, they don't let us do anything." And now you say that.
And our standards will be the same. We're not going to get involved in the reports. We're not going to get involved with the disputes. We're not getting involved with the finger pointing.
Mm-hmm.
We are the platform. And we want to be the platform for, brokers, shippers, and ultimately there'll be a different platform for carriers. We know what it's going to be called, but I'm not ready to announce it publicly yet, but it's coming, guaranteed.
Well, that's a very interesting news. I can only imagine what my website's going to be doing the next couple of hours.
Figure this one out. How in the world are we going to offer a platform for carriers, for all interstate property carriers, but we're still never going to talk to carriers? Figure that one out.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. The good news is, and this is one of the things I really admire, is that you don't have people from foreign countries being able to get into your site. So
I got two words for you.
That is actually really respectable.
America first.
Nice.
America
that is unheard
first.
of in transportation.
I can definitely go for that. Okay, Darren, you dropped a huge bomb on us, and I think it's going to take a little bit of time for carriers out there to process that one. But do you have any other final thoughts that you want to share?
No,
I think there's
really.
somebody on Facebook that's writing up a comment.
I haven't really been paying attention to any of these questions that are being thrown at you guys. I guess maybe the best thing, is there anything you want to ask me before we go? Because I'm not an easy guy to get a hold of, and it's quite unusual that I do something like this. Okay, this is the first in 20 years.
The only thing that I would want to ask you right now is if we could invite you to come back, say in 3-6 months, to work with us again. Just kind of like as a follow-up, I'd love to have you on the calendar. One, it would give more people an opportunity to think about what they want to say.
Yeah, I'm not against it. Put it that way. I am a pretty busy guy. The reason I found out about your podcast today is because we monitor a lot of things that go on online, and we have stuff that watches for it. And we got alerted to your announcement about your podcast today, which was brought to my attention and intrigued me a little bit because it was all about freight guard reports. And John, I think you can attest to this. I picked up the phone and called you and said hi.
John texted me.
Your 411.
I was like,
what's up, John? And
I could tell anyone out there who's listening, if you ever see Carrier 411 show up on your caller ID, it really does make you wonder what the hell just happened.
Yeah. Well, you know what? So it turned into this, and I'm cool with that because I think there's a lot of things that carriers do need to understand. I think there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings out there. And you know what? I applaud the two of you, Kate and John. Maybe we've cleared up some of those things and help educate and inform people a little bit better and prevent problems.
That would be a huge plus for everybody right now. There are too many problems as it is. Kate, you got any closing thoughts you want to throw out there?
Not particularly. I think we covered most everything. I'm sure there's some stuff that we'll get off here and I'll be like, crap, I should have asked this or I should have said that. But honestly, for the most part, in general, I would say that this whole episode, I guess, so to speak, has definitely swayed my opinion a little bit on Carrier 411. I was one of those people that was very did not like it and did not think that it was beneficial at all in any way. So I'm really glad that you were able to clear a lot of that stuff up. I really appreciate it.
It's the brokers who find it extraordinarily beneficial, and what they tell us is they couldn't run their business without it. The people who we don't allow to have accounts are usually the people who don't understand or mischaracterize or misunderstand things. And no, unfortunately, I know you guys have your dispatch service. We don't let dispatch services have accounts. And I just have to warn a lot of carriers, other than what you guys are doing, because I'm sure you are very much above board. There's a lot of shady dispatch services out there that are directly involved in the identity theft of carriers, double brokering, triple brokering, and stolen freight. And it's for those reasons we don't let dispatch services anywhere near our platform. And I hope you guys understand, but I'm sure you're doing a great job at what you're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say half the people we fight are people who do what we do and do it illegally. So no, I completely understand.
Good. Well, I truly wish the best, for both of you and what you guys are doing, and for carriers. They're very interesting times right now, but I don't think they're going to get any better. This is like the new world order now.
I hate to say it, but I kind of agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Darren, thank you so much for coming out with us today. We really do appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll be able to have you on again. For everyone else out there, we are always here Monday, 5 p.m. Central Time. Come check us out, and we're happy to talk about anything anyone really wants to hit us with. Hit me up in the middle of the week if you got a certain topic you want to discuss at dbbh.hotline@vigilanttransport.com, or you can go ahead and get a hold of Kate for the same stuff at kprice@rockdovefs.com. Other than that, make sure your wheels stay on the road. Stay safe out there, folks, and have yourselves a good one. We'll catch you later.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.